Ready to go? Okay. Welcome everybody to our conference today to talk about a very important bill, H.R. 5356 for the National Infrastructure Bank. I will be your host and moderator, Randolph Fuller. I'm here from North Carolina. I've worked on both sides of this issue. I was a mayor for 4 terms, the closest to the people, but also with infrastructure, actually being on the business end of a manhole, putting that in the ground, what we need to build our communities. I'm going to start off with a welcome statement from one of our friends who would love to be here today, Congressman Chuy Garcia. Hello everyone, greetings from Chicago. This is Congressman Chuy Garcia. I am proud to represent Illinois' 4th Congressional District. Obviously, I would have enjoyed being there with you today to talk about the importance of creating a national infrastructure bank. It's an initiative I'm very supportive of, and I appreciate Congressman Davis's champion of this issue. Unfortunately, a recent change in the voting schedule has impacted my travel to DC this week. Regardless, the briefing today is a timely one. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, of which I am a member of, is scheduled to mark up a surface transportation bill this week. I am glad there is a provision in that bill that would study the creation of a federal infrastructure bank. But I think we are past the time for studies. Hear, hear. From high-speed rail to lead water service line replacement, a national infrastructure bank will have a transformative impact in Chicago, Illinois, and in communities nationwide. Every community, folks, is going to benefit from this. It would require no new federal appropriations, and it would not create new federal taxes. Our country needs to demonstrate that we can still build large infrastructure projects, and I am a firm believer that a national infrastructure bank can help us do just that. Thank you all for your work and continued advocacy. I look forward to standing shoulder to shoulder with you to make the National Infrastructure Bank a reality. Thank you, Congressman. So, I am so happy to introduce someone that I've only known on Zoom. So folks, in today's digital world, some of these folks I've worked with on Zoom and some I have met personally. I would like to introduce Alfeca Mutardi, former senior economist and of the International Monetary Fund, lead economist of H.R. 5356 National Infrastructure Bank. She's from Fairfax, Virginia. Alfeca, if you would come up here and lead us off on this journey about the infrastructure bank. Thank you. Everything okay? Okay.
Thank you very much, Randy. Appreciate it. As Randy said, I've been advising on this National Infrastructure Bank proposal, both from the technical side, and believe me, I learned a lot about infrastructure working on this, and also from the economic side, because this bank will not only build the nation, but it'll revamp the American economy and really help with our #1 issue today, affordability. So here's our bill that we have up on the screens. We reintroduced the bill last September. We really thank the main sponsor, Rep. Danny Davis, for sponsoring this bill. Our coalition's been very active in getting support on the bill. We now have 60 members of Congress on board. We are in a drive to add more members of Congress. Infrastructure is at a critical point. And as I'll talk to you in a minute, we're running out of money to pay for infrastructure through the budget. That's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, so the importance of this bank is getting bigger and bigger. The list of sponsors on the bill is there by alphabetic order of the states that people are in. If you would like to have a sign up for the copy of the slides, there's a handout over there. But we want to get this bill moving quickly because the time has come. As Congressman Garcia said, the time has come. We can't wait any longer, and we need to build our nation's infrastructure. What we've learned from looking at history and budgets, that's my specialty, is budgets, is that we cannot adequately finance infrastructure through budgets. Not through the federal budget, state and local budgets, even private capital money. That money's there, but nowhere near enough. And the proof of the pudding is that the American Society of Civil Engineers came out with a new report card in 2025, and they said despite federal spending, despite, for example, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the unfunded gap for our nation's infrastructure grew by an additional 40% in just 4 years' time to $3.7 trillion over a 10-year period. The good news is this bank will finance all of that infrastructure and fix everything. The other good news is this is not a new model. We've had national infrastructure banks like this in our nation's past, starting after the American Revolutionary War. That was supported by George Washington and built by Alexander Hamilton, and then going all the way through the Great Depression and World War II with FDR's bank. They built huge chunks of our nation's infrastructure, like the Tennessee Valley Authority, all the Colorado River system, dams and levees and electrical generation, which now is running dry and in a crisis mode and needs a little bit more help. The Transcontinental Railroad, all those kinds of things were built with banks like this. Other countries around the world like this model so much they call it the American system, and they have permanent banks in place to finance their infrastructure. This bank operates the same as any commercial lending bank. It does not need any money from the budget. It is completely independent of the budget. It's capitalized using treasuries that are already out there. There's about $31 trillion in treasuries all around the world, held by lots of different folks, and we would solicit some of those treasuries to swap for preferred stock in the bank, and these investors will get a little bit of extra boost on their dividend earnings, and that money comes out of earnings from the NIB's loans. The NIB lives on net interest earnings, just like any commercial bank does, so it does not need money from the federal budget to operate, and then it gives out a loan just the same as any commercial bank. Uses the same accounting software and banking rules and that kind of thing. You might be surprised to know that banks create money when they give out a loan. It's part of their accounting features. And this bank would be no different. However, this is a public bank, so we want to be offering the very lowest interest rates possible, flexible repayment terms to the borrowers. And this bank will cover everything. All of the funding gap that still exists after whatever is going to be reauthorized under this. It's great that we're in the transportation infrastructure meeting room because they're marking up this week. New 5-year bill. It'll be a little bit smaller than the last one, and they'll still, even after the bill, there'll still be a lot of money left over to cover for transportation, bridges, all of the critical infrastructure that we need, plus we need much more. We need to work on the electric grid. We've got a crisis there. We need to work on affordable housing. We have a crisis there. And we need a better transportation and rail system and broadband and other things like that. And the southwest of the United States, we have folks here from the southwest, they're running dry of water, and we have plans for bringing in new water supplies to those areas. So all of those things would be worked on. Won't go over every one of them, the housing crisis, the Colorado River crisis, the grid crisis, and rail, but the bank will cover all of those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alfecca. I would direct you to check out her presentation. It's very thorough, and it really gets into depth what we need to do with infrastructure. Our next speaker is a mayor, Dr. Brian Kennedy, mayor of Glendale, Wisconsin. He's also the vice chair of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District and the national president of the Democratic Municipal Officials. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk today about the support that I'm bringing here from essentially 4 different hats that I wear in favor of the National Infrastructure Bank. As my friend said, I am currently the mayor of Glendale, Wisconsin, a first-tier suburb of Milwaukee. We're a thriving community, home to 3 Fortune 1000 companies. I am the commissioner and vice chair of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District Commission, which serves 28 communities in southeastern Wisconsin. I'm also serving as the National President of Democratic Municipal Officials, which is a partisan organization of local elected officials, so city council members, mayors, school board members, and other local elected officials. And I'm also very active with the National League of Cities, where we have pushed for support of the National Infrastructure Bank. I am a leader who talks regularly with folks from both parties and from communities large and small, rural and urban, all across the country. And we are at a point in our history where municipal governments are facing growing infrastructure crises that cannot be solved with the current financing tools that are available to us. Our cities, towns, and villages are being squeezed from every direction. For many of us, state shared revenue has failed to keep up with inflation and infrastructure needs in most of our states. Federal infrastructure grants are helpful, but they're highly competitive and often too limited in scope. At the same time, the cost of construction, labor, and materials has risen dramatically over the past decade. As a result, municipalities are increasingly forced to borrow simply to maintain the basic infrastructure that our residents depend on every day. Roads, bridges, sidewalks, streetlights, stormwater systems, public buildings, fleet equipment. These are not luxuries. These are the backbone of municipal economic development and public safety. Even fiscally responsible communities are struggling under the weight of borrowing costs. My own city maintains a very strong financial position with a fund balance of 43%, high bond ratings from the ratings agencies. Yet despite those strong metrics, our most recent bond issuance in 2025 still carried an interest rate of just over 4% for a 10-year general obligation municipal bond. If communities with strong reserves and top-tier credit ratings are paying those rates, imagine the burden on smaller communities, older industrial cities, or rural towns with shrinking tax bases. The current system forces local governments to devote enormous amounts of taxpayer money toward interest payments on debt service instead of toward actual infrastructure improvements. The concept behind the National Infrastructure Bank is neither radical nor untested. In many ways, it mirrors successful revolving loan fund models that already exist, and ones that we've seen from my colleague who spoke right before me, that we have had throughout our history. The Environmental Protection Agency administers the Clean Water Fund loan program that helps communities finance water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. In Wisconsin, we have a companion to that, the Environmental Improvement Fund, which has successfully financed wastewater treatment plants, water main replacements, sewer upgrades, and stormwater infrastructure for decades. Those programs work because they provide stable, affordable financing for essential public infrastructure. They recognize that certain investments are too important to leave entirely at the mercy of volatile bond markets. But there's a glaring gap in our infrastructure financing system. Outside of water and sewer projects, local governments have very few affordable financing tools for the infrastructure that our residents see and use every day. There are no comparable revolving loan funds dedicated to roads, bridges, sidewalks, street lighting, public transit infrastructure, and other core municipal assets. The National Infrastructure Bank would help fill that gap. It would give local governments access to lower cost, long-term financing that could save taxpayers billions of dollars over time while accelerating desperately needed infrastructure investment nationwide. This is not simply about concrete and asphalt. Infrastructure is economic policy. It is workforce policy. It is housing policy. It is public safety policy. Communities cannot grow, businesses cannot expand, and families cannot thrive when roads crumble, bridges deteriorate, and basic public infrastructure falls behind and is neglected. At the local level, we do not have the luxury of ideological debates about whether infrastructure matters. Potholes don't have a political party. We live with the consequences every day. We hear from residents when streets flood, when water mains break, when sidewalks become unsafe, and when deteriorating infrastructure discourages investment in our communities by new businesses. H.R. 5356 represents a practical approach rooted in a very simple idea. America should finance long-term infrastructure in a smarter, more sustainable way than we currently are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. If I'd known you wear a lot of hats too, I would have brought my weather one from the hotel.
I don't look good at hats, though.
We're going to go with Lacey first. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Mayor Lacey Beatty from Beaverton, Oregon, a long way to get here. She's on the advisory board of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, a U.S. Army veteran who served in the Iraq War. Mayor Beatty has used her platform to advocate strongly for veteran causes at both the state and national levels. Welcome, Mayor. As a son of a veteran, I welcome you.
All right, I don't know. That was super technical. Your speaker remarks. I'm gonna have to like catch up and be a little bit more rooted in infrastructure facts. But the reality is, this is a long time coming. And as a proud Oregonian, our state senator, Senator Merkley, years ago created a WIFIA loan program that allowed cities to borrow money over a long period of time to support water infrastructure. And the only reason Beaverton is water rich right now is the WIFIA loan program that helped us accomplish that. So in that vein, I'm Lacey Beatty, the very lucky mayor of Oregon. Thank you for having me today. I'm glad to be a part of this conversation because infrastructure is not abstract for cities. It's roads, it's bridges, it's housing and water, and the systems people rely on every single day. We all know that bipartisan infrastructure law was an important step, but cities are still facing major needs and there's real uncertainty about the future funding. That means we need practical, long-term financial solutions that help communities build what people actually need. In Oregon, our infrastructure challenges are significant. Our state received a C grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers with concerns about roads, bridges, transit, wastewater, storms, and dams. And if you've not been to Oregon, water is both our asset and our nemesis when it comes to infrastructure. We are facing major housing and water infrastructure needs, especially as communities continue to grow. Here, or in the Portland region, transportation infrastructure is critical to our economy and quality of life. Our major example is the Interstate 5 bridge over the Columbia River connecting Oregon and Washington. It's more than 100 years old, and it carries 140,000 vehicles a day. Replacing it is not optional. It's essential. And we all know waiting only makes projects like this more expensive. And if you think getting a construction project done in your community is hard, try doing it over 2 states that are trying to fight over who funds the bridge. This is exactly why financing tools like the National Infrastructure Bank matters. Cities and regions need access to affordable long-term capital to make projects like this move forward. But this is not just about mega projects. It matters for cities like Beaverton too. In downtown Beaverton, where I am the mayor, we are doing a project called The Loop, a project that reconnects neighborhoods, improves safety, and makes our downtown more walkable and vibrant. Just to give you a photo, our downtown has a rail line and 2 abandoned state highways that intersect the middle of our prosperity. It is the key example. When we talk about redlining, it comes to real life in Beaverton, Oregon. We are attempting to right some of those wrongs. We're never going to be able to move traffic out of the way, but we can make it safe for you to walk with your families, to get from City Hall to our libraries to our restaurants. But we need a tool to be able to make it happen. Communities across the country are working to address housing shortages while balancing the cost of infrastructure needs to start and support new homes. These are real challenges with real price tags. Cities are ready to do the work. We're always ready to do the work, but we need financing tools that help us move faster and stretch local dollars further. The infrastructure needs in the Pacific Northwest reflect what communities across this country are facing. We cannot afford to wait for a system to fail before we act. That's why I support the National Infrastructure Bank. It's about giving communities practical tools to build housing. We hear it all the time. We need more housing. We need more roads. We often ask community members what they want, but we never ask, what are you willing to pay for? An infrastructure bank would put cities in the middle of being able to do this work quickly. Trust me, if you want housing, infrastructure is the key to doing it. Thank you for having me today. Let's get this infrastructure bank built.
Thank you. I finally get to meet you in person. So folks, a lot of what we do with this amazing group that's been advocating for years on this are these Zoom calls because we can't meet in person. And I remember that call a month ago, and when you heard about it, you're like, how do I sign up?
Let's do it. Yeah.
I mean, when you're a mayor, infrastructure is the issue.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on in.
One more point. Our roads are our #1 capital investment in a city. I know that's weird to think about, but that is like what the city owns. That's what we're giving our next generation. And if we want something built, we're going to have to do it now. It's only getting more expensive. All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right.
So I'm excited to introduce our sponsor, Congressman Davis. Come on up. Big round of applause. Congressman Vasquez as well?
Yes.
Oh, come on. Who's going to be speaking first? I don't want to lose choices. Okay.
Introduce.
Congressman Vasquez, thank you very much for coming down. As you know, we've talked before. This is incredibly important, so we appreciate you coming and speaking.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for being such a leader on this effort. Thank you all today. I apologize for being a little tardy. I was in a committee hearing, as there is still some legislating happening up here every once in a while. But my name is Gabe Vasquez. I represent the 2nd District of New Mexico proudly. It's a big, beautiful place, a district bigger than the whole state of Pennsylvania, if you can imagine it. But we're not planning on seceding anytime soon. We are planning on making this nation greater, better built, and having the opportunity to lead with some of these very innovative efforts, such as a National Infrastructure Bank proposal. So thank you all for being here today. For my fellow New Mexican Senator, great to see you, and others as well. I am a proud co-sponsor of the National Infrastructure Bank Act because this is exactly the kind of big picture thinking that we need now. Across the country, communities are feeling the strain of aging infrastructure and rising costs. And right now, we need innovative solutions that help us move forward at the federal level to address the critical infrastructure needs in states like New Mexico. New Mexico is a state with enormous economic potential. We're home to world-class energy resources, national laboratories, military installations, growing manufacturing industries, and some of the most breathtaking landscapes and public lands in the country. We're also at the crossroads for trade, tourism, and energy development across the Southwest. But unlocking that potential that New Mexico has requires modern infrastructure. Too many communities, especially those in rural America, in rural parts of New Mexico like mine, are dealing with roads and bridges that are dilapidated, that are aging, and that have been neglected for decades. Our rural and tribal communities struggle with water systems that are outdated and unreliable. This is one of the biggest requests that I get for my own personal funding in my home district. Families face rising housing costs and long traffic-ridden commutes. Businesses looking to expand often run into transmission bottlenecks, transportation limitations, or inadequate public infrastructure. And as the Southwest population continues to grow and climate pressures intensify, our need for long-term investment in water infrastructure and grid modernization has become even more urgent. The reality is that our current approach to infrastructure funding is often too slow, too fragmented, and too partisan. We move from grant to grant cycle. We move from continuing resolution to continuing resolution here, while the scale of our community's infrastructure needs stability and needs to continue to grow. That's why I believe that a national infrastructure bank deserves serious attention here in Washington, D.C. What I appreciate about this proposal is that it recognizes infrastructure not simply as an expense, but a long-term national investment. Throughout our history, transformative infrastructure projects have helped drive economic growth and expand opportunity, from our railroads to rural electrification, to the interstate highway system, to the deployment of broadband. Those investments didn't just improve transportation or utilities, they connected communities, strengthened local economies, and positioned the United States to compete globally for generations. We should be thinking with that same level of ambition today. The National Infrastructure Bank would create another tool to finance large-scale, long-term projects that too often struggle to move forward under our current system. And importantly, it would help leverage private capital to support infrastructure development without relying solely on annual appropriations. For a state like New Mexico, that could mean greater capacity to modernize freight and trade corridors, strengthen water infrastructure, expand transmission and energy infrastructure, improve rural connectivity, and support housing and community development projects that create long-term and stable economic growth. At the ground level, those investments would help make New Mexicans more prosperous, more connected, more comfortable, and have a better quality of life. And at a moment when Americans are frustrated by rising costs and parents are concerned that their kids aren't likely to have the same level of opportunity that they did, investing in infrastructure is one of the cleanest and clearest ways that we can create durable economic growth that people can actually see and feel in their daily lives. And that also helps restore folks' trust in government, which is very badly needed today. So I appreciate the work of Congressman Davis and everyone involved in advancing this conversation. I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues, stakeholders, labor partners, and local leaders to ensure New Mexico and its communities, and those communities across the country, have the tools that they need to build a better future. Now, let me tell you personally, before coming to Congress, serving on my city council, and having the largest infrastructure project that I wanted funded for a blighted area of New Mexico's second largest city, and having to pull together 4 or 5 different sources of funds, having to get bond ratings approved, having to have competitive grants out there for years, and trying to patch together state dollars with private investment. It was one of the hardest things to do as a local official. We had the vision, we had the need, we had clear outcomes, but patching together all those sources of funding under uncertainty, trying to lure in private investors, trying to figure out if we were going to get those competitive grants here at the federal government, made the whole project an absolute nightmare. Now, I'm glad that the state stepped up with their metropolitan redevelopment area legislation, which allowed us to collect local taxes that go into a specific pool so that we can fund the revitalization of that neighborhood. But it shouldn't just be up to cities to do this on their own, or local taxpayers that potentially take away from larger tax bases. I think the National Infrastructure Bank would do wonders to help solve some of these issues, empower our local and state and county elected officials to be able to do the important work of building out the next generation of communities, repairing our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure. So I'm happy to support this, and I'm happy again that Congressman Davis invited me to join you all today. Thank you all so much.
It's so important that you served locally before you went to Congress. As a 4-term mayor, I couldn't say it better than you said. It's hard to get this money and actually make our communities better. Thank you for your support in coming up. And you have friends here from New Mexico that
Yes.
came all the way out here to serve on the panel.
Yeah.
They all know this is important.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I'm very pleased to introduce someone who I admired growing up in the area before I went down to North Carolina. Congressman Davis has been here a long time, and he has a lot of wisdom, which is why he stands firmly behind this, and we owe you a debt, sir.
Yeah.
Please come on up.
Well, thank you. Let me just say how delighted I am to be here with all of you this morning. To see a room full of activated citizens warms the heart, although it's already warm outside, but it warms the heart even more. And I am so delighted that all of you are engaged, involved, understand what your presence means, understand what it means to organize, to participate, to all of the mayors, other elected officials. I've never been a mayor, but I did serve on the Chicago City Council for 3 terms. I did run for mayor, but I didn't get elected, but I didn't let that stop me. But I've also been on a county board, and at the end of the year, I will have been here for 30 years. I will be ending 46 years of having been an elected official. And I can tell you that it has been 46 rewarding years, because I've met and been involved with so many wonderful people. People like yourselves, people hoping that your presence is going to make a difference, people with thoughts and ideas about quality of life and what it is that we as individuals, as well as groups. I know it looks kind of dark, it looks kind of murky. I've been reading some election results in terms of some areas where people are being elected that I think ought not be elected. In other places, though, where people are being elected that people didn't expect to get elected. And so we see a combination of all these things going on. I'll tell you one other thing about me. I am 84 years old. I've been married to the same lady for 56 years. And she still bosses me around. Tell me what to do. I always say that's all right, because happy wife means happy life. And so if I can keep that going for another 10 or 12 years, we'll be all right. But let me tell you, you've heard how important having an infrastructure bank is. Plus, if you're old as I am, I grew up in rural Arkansas, and we had dirt roads when I was a kid. Dirt roads. The only paved road was the highway that ran through the center of town. And then the little piece called the town. I looked it up on the internet the other day. There's still 197 people there. So I guess you could call that rural America. But we got to take America back. We have fought too hard and too long to create a form of government where the people are the ones who make the decisions. And I do believe that a people united will never be defeated. So please keep hanging in there with us. We're going to get across the finish line, and we're going to get ourselves an infrastructure bank. Thank you all very much.
The congressman may have only served 3 years on the Chicago City Council, but I grew up in the area. That gives you a master's degree, maybe a PhD in politics. 3 years, 3 terms is all it takes. Okay. One thing you mentioned, Congressman, that's oh so true in my travels, and I think everyone else knows this, we're a first world country, but in many places we have third world amenities. And the national infrastructure will address this. Our next speaker, moving along, is Brian Sullivan, Treasurer of Sonoma County, Vice Chair of the National Association of Counties Transportation Committee. He came all the way here from Washington. Brian, come on up.
Yeah, the other
It's
one.
a long way. The other Washington.
I know there's a lot of speakers to go, so I'm going to curtail my remarks a little bit. But I am Brian Sullivan, Sonoma County Treasurer, and a lot of people say, why is the county treasurer so involved in infrastructure, right? But I started my career at city council and mayor. I was on the transportation committee in the state house. I've just spent my whole life working on transportation infrastructure issues. And there's an old saying in Washington State: we should not wait for the bridge to fall into the river. Right? And it's like potholes don't have a party either, right? We have to work hard and pay attention to these things that are not, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, that you don't get a headline on. It's not sexy, but it's critical for jobs and commerce, right? And without jobs, what do we have? We don't have a tax base, we don't have good school districts, we don't have good bus systems. So that's how critical it is. So when I first got involved, with H.R. 5356, it was a little bit of a ragtag team. They came to NACO and they wanted me to support this resolution for the National Association of Counties, get it out of the Transportation Committee. And it's really interesting. At the end of the day, we have 3,250 counties. The vast majority of them are red counties, right? Everybody knows the federal government is spending exponentially right now. The fear is there won't be any money, right? The grants will be curtailed. The dollars that we get now may not be available tomorrow, and that's why this is so critical. So when we gave the presentation at NACO, National Association of Counties, the red counties all stood up, asked a few questions, and then voted to support the bill, right? And the resolution. And so they know, in all their previous resolutions, by the way, were don't take our money away from us, don't take our grants away from us. So, and I don't think the federal government will take your grants away. They just won't put much money in it because they won't have it. So I'll get to the crux. So I get to the Treasury after 35 years in government working on infrastructure, begging, borrowing, stealing, creating synergy to pull this all together. And I have a $1.8 billion investment pool, right? Because as a treasurer, I represent all the school districts. I invest all their money, water districts, sewer districts, fire districts, you name it. I have 92 jurisdictions, as well as Snohomish County, a large urban county north of Seattle. And so we worked to deal with the state treasurer. We worked with the state attorney general. We worked with our county officials. And we came up with an idea of developing our own infrastructure loan program out of the investment pool. So we are presently, we developed it and we got it done. And now we're presently have loaned out about $50 million, road projects, affordable housing projects. But it's not, $50 million is nothing, right? It's nothing. And so, but like the housing authority came to me and said, if we can get $20 million, we can get across the finish line to get this project done. And they pulled together all these resources and synergy in the state of Washington, the federal government. And so we got the housing authority across the finish line. We got our local port across the finish line, created 2,000 local jobs. We didn't ship our money off to investments to New York or over the ocean or anything. We invested locally. Tax dollars doing the work locally. That's why this particular bill is so important. It's off book. Now, in 1980, as a staff person in the state Senate, I worked hard to create a state infrastructure bank called the Public Works Assistance Fund. 20 years later, I get back as a member, there's $1 billion in there. Wasn't off book. Guess what happened? The state legislature said, we got a budget shortfall, we're gonna take $1 billion, right? And now the state of Washington is selling bonds, 4%, 3.8%, selling bonds to loan it out to local jurisdictions at 1.5% interest. Not a good business model, right? So we have a long road to hoe to get that bridge rebuilt across the river. And someone said a C grade, I think nationally it's a D grade, isn't it? Or pretty close, we have to start listening to our civil engineers. I'll leave you with this. Alexander Hamilton invented the first American bank. He invented this technical process of doing treasury swaps, which Alpaca, couldn't get to quick enough. But it works. And if you want to join the EU as a nation, you're required to have an infrastructure bank. And it's called the American model, right? China has got 3 infrastructure banks. We're way behind the 8 ball here, and that's why this bill is so important to support and get across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Couple key takeaways. It will not add to the national debt, or it will not add to the deficit. Our next speaker is Representative Pamela Herndon from New Mexico House of Representatives and the chair of the Albuquerque City NAACP. Pamela, it was great to have dinner with you last night, and welcome. A long way to get here.
So good afternoon. I am Representative Pamela Herndon from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and like many of my colleagues here, I do also wear many hats, not only as a legislator, but also as a member of the community. And wearing those hats, that makes me qualified to explain why we must have this National Infrastructure Bank to occur. So I want to just tell you about 3 specific examples that I want you to remember. And the first one is looking back at what the NAACP did back in 2018. So it was during their 109th convention. And guess what they did? They passed a resolution in support of infrastructure. And it was called Supporting Funding for and Involvement with Rebuilding Our Nation's Public Infrastructure. And one of the goals of that resolution was to bring attention to the fact that we need to make sure that communities of color are not excluded from the economic and the environmental benefits, that's right, of infrastructure spending. And this goal included several things. I want you to know they wanted to make sure that there would no longer ever be a water crisis like we saw with the Flint water crisis. and that infrastructure crisis in low-income neighborhoods would cease to exist. And at the time the NAACP resolution was made, no, the funding was coming from insecure places. It was coming from sometimes from the Congress, sometimes from the state, sometimes from the county, sometimes from a city. But if we had a national infrastructure bank, that would be a firm place where we could make sure that those types of incidents never happened again. And so that's one of the things that we're going to continue to look for and work for. And let me tell you about the second item. So the infrastructure bill is going to also make sure that we have the ability to create jobs in construction and engineering and manufacturing and technology. Because even if you fix the items in our communities, people need jobs. And this infrastructure bill will allow the funding for these types of jobs and all of sorts of the construction work that needs to occur within these cities and in locations where the infrastructure is needed. So let me just give you an example. So if you were in the state of Texas, anybody in here from the state of Texas? All right, there is one Texan, two of them back there. So what if the state of Texas was the only state that had enough money to have the exact amount of infrastructure funding they needed, to have the best roads in the whole state, in the whole county, in the whole country? Well, that would be a problem because when they got ready to move any type of equipment, any type of food supply chain items out of the state of Texas, they have to go through the surrounding states, Colorado, Oklahoma, and my state of New Mexico and Louisiana. But if the roads in those states are not good roads, then there is going to be an efficiency problem in trying to move items from place to place. So what we want to do is to make sure every single state has access to quality, affordable infrastructure, and that we want to make sure that it happens every single time. And then let me tell you about one other thing. You know, in the state of New Mexico, like other states, one of the things that we are trying to do is to make sure that there's quality, affordable housing. And in order to alleviate that housing shortage, guess what would happen? The national infrastructure funding could help take care of that. And once the national infrastructure funding takes care of a housing shortage, then we can move on to take care of other things like energy systems, modernizing transportation systems, and making sure that every home has broadband access. So a national infrastructure system will help that. So that means we've got to not only get the support from this room, but other places. And I'm going to give you a mantra to remember. Remember, better roads, better bridges, and jobs start with a national infrastructure bank. Our job is to fix it, fund it, build it. Remember that. Fix it, fund it, build it. Support H.R. 5356. Our legislation that will create the National Infrastructure Bank. And thank you.
That mantra sounds like what I'm told to do at home on weekends. Fix it, fund it, and build it. All right, we have another speaker here, Dr. Chow Wu, who's from the Maryland House of Delegates, Howard County Board of Education. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are we still awake? I'm Maryland State Delegate Chow Wu from District 9A, representing Howard and Montgomery counties. And I serve in the Ways and Means Committee and the Government, Labor, and Election Committee. At the same time, I'm a co-chair of STEM and Emerging Caucus. So besides serving as state legislator, I work as an engineer, and now I'm an AI data scientist. My background teaches me to look at a complex system through data, trends, and long-term planning. And right now, the data on American infrastructure is flashing red. The facts are clear. American infrastructure is aging. So we see it every day. Old roads and aging bridges, old water pipes, outdated power system, traffic congestion, transit system that needs upgrades, and public school buildings that desperately needs repairs. These challenges exist at every level, federal, state, county, and local. Many local governments already know what needs to be fixed. They have plans ready to go, but they simply do not have the funding or financing tools to handle projects at this time. When I served on Howard County Board of Education, we faced this problem directly. Our school system was aging, deferred maintenance kept growing year after year. Some school buildings are now 60, even 70 years old, still waiting to be rebuilt or fully renovated. And remember, Howard County is one of the richest counties in the state. It's top 6 in the state. If communities like ours struggle to meet the infrastructure needs, imagine the challenges facing thousands of other counties and school systems across this country. Infrastructure is not just about concrete and steel. It is about safety. It is about jobs. It is about economic growth. It's about opportunity. And it's about future quality life for our children and families. Ultimately, it's about hope and prosperity. That's why I strongly support NIB here today. The proposal would create a $5 trillion national infrastructure bank to help finance major projects across the country. And importantly, it does not require raising federal taxes or adding directly to the national deficit. It uses long-term investment to support long-term national growth. And the idea is not new. Alexander Hamilton created the first bank of the United States to help build and strengthen our young nation. Later, America used similar financial tools to build railroads, highways, power systems that help transform our economy. Many countries around the world still use this model successfully now. For example, Germany, China, and many others invest heavily through national infrastructure banks to modernize transportation, energy, housing, and the industry system. The United States should also invest heavily and boldly in our future. Under this proposal, Maryland alone could receive significant long-term infrastructure investment while supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs over the next decade. Further action would be the best path forward. But if Washington remains stuck in gridlock, states cannot afford to wait. That's the reason I'm also urging our state lawmakers to explore the idea of an East Coast Infrastructure Investment Bank. I call it ECIIB, connecting states along the Eastern Corridor to support major regional projects. For example, true high-speed rail. Just think about the true high-speed railroad connecting from Connecticut to Boston, to Maryland, to DC, to Virginia, to North Carolina. That would be a huge support for the whole East Corridor. Modern energy grid, upgrade ports, critical climate resilience infrastructure. We must think long-term, must build not only for today, but for the next generation. First generation built the infrastructure that made America strong, and it's our turn now. Too often in Washington, we spend more time blaming each other than solving problems together. But the American people expect us to face these challenges directly, find common ground, and build solutions for our future. The NIB will give us that opportunity. The opportunity to invest in our people, opportunity to rebuild our communities, and the opportunity to think long-term once again. Let's build the future together. Thank you.
Dr. Wood? Shishi. Someone dropped something. Congressman, thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Susie Shannon. She's a policy director of housing, where housing is a human right for housing advocate for low-income communities, and she's the chair of the DNC Poverty Council, all the way here from Los Angeles. Thank you for coming in, Susie.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Okay, great. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm Susie Shannon, Policy Director for Housing as a Human Right. We have over 750,000 people who are homeless in this country. We have almost 50% who are rent burdened, paying over 30% of their income on rent. We have a public housing infrastructure that is crumbling, and we have a dearth of Section 8 housing to the point where people are on the Section 8 waiting list for almost 5 years. We need 7 million rental units in order to meet our low-income housing needs in this country. So we are in an affordable housing crisis. The way that we fix that, or one of the ways, is to make sure that we have a way that is independent of our budget to fund this. So the National Infrastructure Bank will provide over $500 billion for affordable housing. That is incredible. We lobby every single year to make sure that our low-income housing is not cut. It's one of the first things that our Congress looks at when they're trying to cut the budget, and this actually provides a real answer for us in order to find an independent way to raise money. So we hope that you will go back to the legislators and let them know to support the National Infrastructure Bank, and we're so excited to be part of this coalition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is my brother from Labor in North Carolina, Grant Welch, Political and Legislative Director for CWA North Carolina and the Vice President of North Carolina AFL-CIO. Grant, come on up here and tell us about how this connects to labor.
Thank you, Randy. And at this point, it's good afternoon, everyone. As Randy said, Grant Welch, I represent in North Carolina over 9,000 members of the Communications Workers of America, and we represent telecom, airlines, and manufacturing. As part of the board of the North Carolina AFL-CIO, in North Carolina, we represent over 120,000 members of labor. Now, a landmark piece of legislation was passed in 2021, the IIJA, and that brought in $1.2 trillion of investment in order to rebuild crumbling roads, bridges, and public transportation systems, supporting advanced energy technologies and clean water infrastructure, and near and dear to CWA, closing the digital divide. It also allowed to modernize the electric grid, and for labor, those are real wins. Part of that piece of legislation was prevailing wages and also the apprenticeship support that it provided. The critical gaps with the IIJA, as we have found out, is it was canceled or put on pause with an executive order. The NIB, H.R.5356, it solves these issues. Where the IIJA was a down payment of investment, this is now the solution that we're looking towards. This closes every gap. I'll go through a few of them. Number one, mandatory PLAs, project labor agreements. This is not optional, and it is not executive order dependent. In any state where the NIB funds at least $35 million in construction contracts, or where state law already allows it, the project must use a project labor agreement, a pre-hire collective bargaining agreement with a labor union. This is baked into the statute. Number two, prevailing wages guaranteed by law. All projects funded by the NIB must pay workers the prevailing wage as determined by the Secretary of Labor. Unlike the IIJA, where enforcement relied heavily on agency guidance and political will, H.R. 5356 makes this a hard statutory requirement tied to every loan the bank issues. Number three, the scale that actually closes the gap. The NIB is a mixed ownership government corporation authorized to raise up to $500 billion in capital and issue up to $5 trillion in loans for projects ranging from high-speed rail and broadband to affordable housing and clean water systems. This is not an annual appropriation. It is a permanent financing institution. Number four, self-sustaining. It is not dependent on the federal budget. I will repeat that. It is not dependent on the federal budget. That is important. And one of the key elements for labor unions is that this bill, the NIB, will give labor unions a seat at the governing table. This is where labor unions will have a voice, and that is the foundation of the labor union, is having a voice in the workplace. The IIJA was a historic victory. I will not deny that. However, H.R. 5356 makes this permanent. And the labor protections unions fought for, prevailing wages, apprenticeships, PLAs, under the IIJA are now exposed to political reversal, where the National Infrastructure Bank locks those standards into durable institution, puts labor at the governing table, and creates a pipeline of union work, not for 5 years, but for generations, and puts America to work.
Thank you, Grant. Our next speaker is Justin Shore. Justin's the president of the Clearwater, Kansas City Council, member of Sedgwick County Extension Executive Board, all the way here from Kansas. Welcome, Justin. It was good to see you last night.
I promised Stuart I'd be quick about it, so I'll make my comments very brief. Good afternoon. My name is Justin Shore, two-time member of the City of Clearwater Council. I sit on the Technical Advisory Committee for my Wichita area MPO, and I chair the Local Elected Officials Caucus in Kansas, representing about 20,000 local electeds. Today, I'd like to briefly add a perspective that doesn't get represented very often when we talk about National Infrastructure Bank, and that's who will really benefit the most from this. You may think infrastructure, that's a huge city bridge, that's a new wastewater treatment plant, that's something monumental, when in reality, it's probably going to be a small city that's replacing a street, or putting in a new water line to replace lead lines. These towns will probably make up the lion's share of the total projects, but not the total spend by the National Infrastructure Bank. And to demonstrate just how many of these small cities really are out there, I'm going to use Kansas as an example. 626 towns and cities in Kansas, and only 5 have a population over 100,000. Only 5. 9 total, cross that 50,000 mark. A whopping 90% of the state is cities under 5,000 people. That's small. They don't have an engineer on staff. They contract one because we're legally required to, but any project we undertake is going to require an expensive engineering bid to a larger engineering firm. And these numbers really hold true for all Midwestern states. Iowa, for example, is 67% under 5,000. Oklahoma and Missouri are 88. Nebraska weighs in at a whopping 94% of their cities under 5,000 population. The budgets in these cities could range from maybe 10 to 15 million all the way down to a few 100,000. If the congressman was still here, I'll tell him my hometown is under 140 people, my original hometown. My city ranks 96th currently in the state. These communities don't have cash on hand to spend money for a quick repair, a road washed away with our ever-increasing crazy storms. Our water infrastructure froze because of a cold snap that caught all of us off guard a few years back. These cities don't have that money. It's all bonded out. We have to bond absolutely everything that we do. Also crucial for these small cities is the design engineering assistance, which hasn't really been discussed yet. These cities would have the ability to get some assistance designing these projects to make them shovel ready before we seek that funding from the bank. That's a crucial element that we must have. That we do not have the staff to do it ourselves. I don't know if your staff members represent a member who has a rural element to your districts, but I remind you that almost every single state does. California, those 5,000 people we talked about in population, that's 62%. North Carolina and Georgia, 78% of those cities. Texas, 80%. And Pennsylvania, 90% under 5,000 people. All those areas need a great deal of engineering assistance. Thank you very much.
Councilman, you spoke truth to the matter. Most of our towns can't afford this, and this is why we have crumbling infrastructure. We have a number of members. Congressman Melanie Stansberry, Democrat from New Mexico 1. She serves on 2 primary standing committees in the U.S. House of Representatives, the House Committee on Natural Resources and the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. She is the ranking member on the DOGE Subcommittee. Welcome, Congresswoman. Come on in. We would love to hear from you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I literally just got off the road. So.
I was the only son with all sisters. I'll take your purse. I'll do whatever we got to do.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today?
Great.
That doesn't sound very enthusiastic. All right, you guys are in it. So, I'm Congresswoman Melanie Stansberry, and I'm so deeply honored to be able to join you all today on this important meeting, but most importantly, to welcome my State House representative, the one and only Pamela Herndon, who actually is my representative in the state legislature and also one of our state champions of this legislation back home in New Mexico. And I think it goes without saying that we need to invest in infrastructure, and we need to do it now, not just as a matter of national security, of national economic development, but as a matter of ensuring that our communities can thrive all across this country. And so I'm excited to be able to support the National Infrastructure Bank Act here on the federal level, and to support efforts to get a bank act passed at the local level as well, and to invest in sustainable infrastructure for our communities. So, you know, I'm sure you all have talked about this quite a lot today, but let me just say that in New Mexico, we know that infrastructure is the basic nuts and bolts of making it possible for our communities to thrive. New Mexico is a vast and diverse place with many rural communities, tribal communities, land grants, and small towns. And what we know is that when we invest in our people and we invest in basic infrastructure, we create opportunity for future generations. In New Mexico, we pay about $767 a year in extra car costs just from driving on rundown roads. I don't know how they came up with that number, but that's what it costs us. Our drinking water systems are facing a $1.4 billion funding gap. That's just for drinking water, and in a year when New Mexico is facing record drought and low snowpack, and in fact, right after this meeting, I'm meeting with our National Weather Service and Irrigation District leaders to understand how New Mexico is going to get through this dire drought. In New Mexico, more than 5% of our bridges are in poor condition, and so many families, especially in our rural communities and on our tribal lands, do not have access to basic broadband and internet service. But these aren't just random statistics. These are the real costs that everyday people face in our community and pay the price for every day in our community. And here's the problem: from our roads to our bridges to our electric grid, we need $3.7 trillion to fix this massive infrastructure gap, not just in New Mexico, but across the country, which is why we passed the historic and generational bipartisan infrastructure bill just a few years ago, and which unfortunately we are watching get dismantled right in front of our eyes. But this problem is only getting worse. The gap is growing to 40% just in the last 4 years, and we can't solve this through the normal appropriations process. That's why we need this National Infrastructure Bank. It's why it's so important, and it's how the United States will reclaim our leadership in building an economy for the future. This legislation, as you all know, would create new federal lending institutions that could raise capital to make these investments to repair our country without requiring new taxes and costs to the federal government and to all of you. It would leverage private investments, it would help fund our roads, our clean water, our broadband, our housing, and always with a specific focus on communities that need it most. And crucially, it requires prevailing wages. And as an office that stands strong with labor and with protecting our workers and fighting to make sure that our families get a fair shake in building the programs that will help our communities thrive, this is a very important part of this overall legislation. Think of this as a 21st century version of what built our country the last generation. The railroads, the highways, the infrastructure that made it possible for our families to get ahead and to make their lives and to live with dignity. Bold public investment that paid for itself through a generation of growth. So from our roads to our bridges to our water pipelines, we know that New Mexico cannot afford to wait, and that this bill gives us the tools to address the infrastructure gap and to rebuild our communities. So I'm proud to be able to support this bill, and I want to say thank you all for being here today, and welcome to your nation's capital. Yeah, great to see you too. All right.
And last but not least, we get to our friend all the way out here from Idaho, Virginia Balu, but her friends know her as Ginny. She is the Western Regional Director of the National Federation of Democratic Women, a former chair of Planning and Zoning Commission of Haley, Idaho, and she lives in Boise. She said, don't say Boise with a Z, or we know you're not from here. Welcome.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you so much. I am Ginny Ballou. I live in Boise, Idaho. I represent a national organization committed to building the standard of living for all people in Idaho and across the country. I was raised in the Hudson Valley in New York State, and I grew up in the midst of dense infrastructure. My family and I rode trains everywhere we went. We enjoyed the benefits of modern schools and hospitals and roads. I moved to Idaho many decades ago, and I travel across the western states both to see my family as they've moved away and to promote the organization. I've witnessed the stark needs of the West for modern infrastructure, including roads, bridges, universal internet, broadband connectivity, new railroads, including high-speed rail and more. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers' latest report card for Idaho, small state, big mass area, small people. Aging assets, rising demand are recurring themes there. More than 1,500 bridges need repair. Over half of our school square footages is in fair or poor condition, and most drinking water and wastewater systems face renewal backlogs. Local agencies' report indicate that many rural roads are also in fair or poor condition, and urban corridors indicate persistent congestion, despite recent capacity projects, while public transportation systems use outdated, aging fleets and growing demand. Dams average 76 years old, and a quarter are classified as high hazard. Airports maintain adequate pavement conditions, but face a $650 million capital shortfall over just the next 6 years. Funding constraints limit progress. Idaho relies heavily on local ratepayers, municipal bonds, and competitive federal programs. Dedicated state funding is rare outside of transportation categories. State law restricts local option taxes, limiting a community's ability to generate new revenue for infrastructure. While the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, and the American Rescue Plan and state programs like Leading Idaho and Transportation Expansion and Congestion Mitigation Fund have supported critical projects, they're often one-time boosts rather than a sustained funding. In many communities, especially small and rural ones, as I'm sure most of ours are, limited tax bases match requirements delay or scale back needed work. Public safety is a concern as well. Roadway fatalities reached a 2-decade high in 2023. 65 wastewater treatment plants reported Clean Water Act violations. While most public water systems meet the federal standards, small systems are more vulnerable to compliance issues. Boil water reports are a common thing. Incompatible land uses near airports, aging school safety systems, wildfire threats to energy and transportation corridors, as well as to the land itself, highlight the need for proactive planning. I travel the roads constantly. I was in New Mexico, I've been in all over. I'm fearful of the time of a bridge collapsing beneath me, or being forced to take a long road around something because one road is closed and there's only one way in or out. My niece thinks that Salt Lake must be a really, really rich community because everywhere she looks they have paved roads. And she's in a community that only has 2. I'm a big advocate for the National Infrastructure Bank. It'll modernize all of our infrastructure, and it has even more benefits. It's a jobs creator. At least create 20 million new jobs paying Davis-Bacon wages and benefits. It'll increase productivity and gross domestic product. Best of all, it will require no new federal spending or federal taxes. I tell my Republican neighbors and Democratic elected officials that this benefits everyone. What is not to like? That's the reason I am so passionate advocate for the NIB. The best way to deal with affordability is to get a high-wage job. And the best for that job to be in the building of projects that we all need, from rail to water. Plus, the NIB will spark a revival of the supplier industries, including steelmaking, power, water, transportation, and other ancillary businesses. It'll benefit small and medium-sized businesses, increase the tax base for all of our governing bodies. So let's just all get behind passing the H.R. 5356, and I would say the sooner the better. Thank you.
I'm going to let the room in on a little secret. Infrastructure never gets cheaper. So I'm going to ask you all a question. When I was mayor, and we have a couple mayors up here, city council members, when you bring these items up to vote on, a lot of times people get vapor locked, the price tag. We had a wastewater system in my community in 2011 we were going to build, $21 million. Do you think the city council wanted to vote for that? No. I'll just ask the room. It's being built now in 2026 to Sanford, where my friend Grant lives. So it's a joint project with a neighboring county. How much do you think that project cost 15 years later? Because we didn't have a National Infrastructure Bank. Any guesses?
36 million.
36 million.
50.
50. Anyone in the audience? Throw out a number.
46 million.
46 million. $105 million. So it's not just an issue of, you know, when we wait, nothing. When we wait, prices just get exponentially more expensive, and we still don't have the infrastructure we need. So we're at the part of the program now where we can let you ask questions from this august panel. Does anyone out here have a question they would like to ask? Sir, you want to give them a mic, or just let them stand up?
I think you stand up.
Okay.
Identify if
Stand
you don't
up,
mind.
let us
We
know who you are.
but
Mike
if
Smith, IBEW Veteran Affairs.
All right.
My question's for Grant. With the PLAs, and I liked what you said about apprentices being connected to it. How about veterans being connected to it, a certain percentage?
That's baked in there, right?
I believe that is baked in.
It is baked in.
It's baked in there as well.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sir, what's your name?
I'm Sam Rosenthal. I'm from Progressive Democrats of America.
Sam, great to see you.
Thanks for having us here. I'm wondering if y'all could characterize just briefly like some of the political objections that you are hearing to this and that we might encounter when we're approaching member offices, other allies that we might have.
Anyone want to take that?
Sure. Normally, we don't have the willpower. I hear all the time from Republican friends, we have the need, we know that, we have the interest, we just don't have the willpower to do that at this time. I lay it out as a challenge. Tell me why you don't believe in rebuilding our country. And why would you not get behind wanting to rebuild our nation? Do something big, do something bold, put in a new infrastructure. Haven't gotten any takers yet, though we have met as a coalition with over 150 Republican offices and just not gotten anyone that's willing to say, yes, I would sign on. I tell in my area, imagine the press you would get when you're the first one with the nerve to say, I support our country. So,
Brian, do you want to address this?
Well, just real quickly, when I created these two small infrastructure banks at the county level, my Republican county council members, you know, they'd walk into my office and say, we don't believe in public banks. So we're going to dismantle your ordinances. But it was a hard fight. There's a little bit of bloodletting. but now they're my biggest supporters, right? Because their little tiny town of Darrington lost its only water pump for its water supply, right? And it was a 1.5 interest loan from the county that saved the town, so to speak, right? So there's a place for public banking. And when someone says, you know, we're competing with commercial banks, you know, we were in financial distress, we had to borrow from the large banks at 9% interest only, right? And so commercial banks typically don't do infrastructure, right? But they'll come and tell you they do, but then they never qualify you, even with great bond ratings. So that's why this is so critical, but you just have to convince the other side.
And you won't get amortization out to 40 years, for
Yeah,
example.
exactly.
Mayor?
So I'm going to give you a tangential example. In Wisconsin, we have an environmental improvement fund that was funded at about $500 million. And in the last biennial budget, we had a group of us who went to the state legislature and said, we want you to increase that to $700 million. So they're actually not doing the bonding, right? They're actually taking money out of our rainy day fund and using that to create a revolving loan fund, and we wanted them to increase it by $200 million. We have a Republican-controlled legislature, a Democratic governor, and they viewed it as yet a liberal project, wanting to essentially, spend all the money. So we had to go out and get a whole bunch of small town mayors and village presidents to come in who are all Republicans, and they had to come in essentially and say, we can't afford to borrow, we need you to increase the fund. And this is very limited, right? It's only for stormwater, it's for wastewater facilities, it's for water treatment plants. So we basically had to go out and we had to find our colleagues who were on the other side of the aisle already or carried a different membership card to a different party and have them come in and lobby. And that's how we were able to get an increase. It's $700 million, and they loaned at about 1.5%. And so many of our municipalities have taken advantage of that, large and small. But there is a lot of support out there. Some folks talked about how most of the counties are red counties, and all these small towns under 5,000 people, many of them run by Republicans. They're the ones that we need to have in the room before we can convince a lot of those folks who are actually going to make the decision that they should make this decision.
I think Mayor Kennedy made a point that when I was a lot younger, I had a mentor that said, when you're doing public policy, it's not a no, it's a K-N-O-W. They don't know. So on a lot of these calls, you would be surprised about what our people don't know about our own history. So like I said, this does not increase the debt. It does not increase the deficit. This is off balance sheet. This is a bank. It's a separate thing. But explaining that to people takes time. Do we have any other questions? Or do you want to answer that as well? All right, go ahead.
Sure. So from Maryland side, we don't have opposition. But I heard opposition is really sometimes people say,
stand up.
So from Maryland, I don't hear much opposition. I think the people realize this is a public interest. So the challenge for some Republicans is really say, this is too much control, right? There's no oversight. I think that's a concern they raised. And at the same time, unfortunately, we really give control about a lot of infrastructure. We sell them to private investment, right? That's a huge concern. And like hospitals, roads, and toll roads, that kind of increase the cost to many people. I think that has been a huge concern. Even in Maryland, we're trying to see what we can do to really manage that in terms of the part of a public interest.
You have anyone else? Okay, we'll just keep going down the line. Susie?
I don't want to speak necessarily to the opposition. I do know we need to get constituents who are in Republican areas to really be pushing their legislators. But I will say that because you're from Progressive Democrats of America, having progressives talk about the National Infrastructure Bank would be so important. Because so often we get into these conversations where like, well, there's no money there. There's money there, right? If we can spend trillions of dollars going toward, there's money there to help the infrastructure in our own country. But having this be a dialogue within the progressive community, I think is also important. So I hope that you can take the message that you heard today and spread it. Thank you.
Anyone else want to address? Justin?
Usually what they propose as an alternative is to put it into a budget bill, which means someone's going to micromanage it and it goes on to our debt. It's on our books. Whereas this costs absolutely nothing. It's infrastructure. Just fund it. Simple as that, really.
Alfecca, do you want to say something?
Yeah, there's lots going on there.
Stand up, Alfecca.
Yeah, you'll see a whole dialogue is a little bit different at the local level than it is at the national level and here in Congress. But this bank is a lender of last resort. It does not compete with the budget, it complements it. It does not compete with banks, it complements it. If they want to do any of those projects, we welcome them to come in and do them, but why is the gap so large? The gap is so large because we are not funding the infrastructure. And then when it comes to progressive Democrats, we also ask you to think big, okay? The House Progressive Caucus has come up with a 10-point plan to improve affordability. We think that's a good start. But this bank will improve affordability. That's the question of the day. It will raise wages because it creates all these great jobs, and it will lower the cost of electricity, housing, and everything else that people need directly, and it'll create great paying jobs. So it's really an over the top, and you know, it cannot be done through the budget. That's the lesson, and for people to hope that it can, it just cannot. And we need this off-budget public bank. We did it before. It's a proven vehicle for solving our problem. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Sir.
Randy, I just wanted to follow up on your comment with regard to the history involved with regard to our infrastructure. The last major...
identify yourself?
Jack Hanna from Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh, Indiana, PA. And that history is this. We have not had a program with regard to our infrastructure that has used the infrastructure bank since 1956 with the Interstate Highway Transportation Act, which changed the whole dynamic of our economy and our country going forward. We have lost our way. The bank expired, which was created under the Hoover administration and conducted under the FDR administration. And since then, we have funded our infrastructure through debt and through taxes. We are now tapped out. So the federal government cannot support this anymore. Everyone realizes that. Our state governments are also under the same kind of stress and situation that the federal government is. Wall Street does not want to invest in this infrastructure of our country. They are too busy making money in other ways, and they are paying attention to other interests that are, I think, adverse to the public interest. The last thing that I want to say is that the infrastructure that we need and to have funded is absolutely necessary for us to compete economically going forward. We face a situation where China and the European economic communities have infrastructure banks and have first-rate airports, first-rate high-speed rail. If we are going to compete internationally, economically, across the world, we have to have a bank. This is controlled not by Congress, not by the executive branch. It is administrated as a bank and subject to the same requirements and standards that a private bank incurs. We've created an import-export bank. This is under the same kind of concept. We need to have this to go forward. Our country's not going to be employ its citizens without it. Public policy is a process where you decide what the priorities are for your citizenry and constituents. Right now, in my opinion, we're investing in Bitcoin and AI to the point that it's unreasonable. It's sucking the investment power that we have in this country to really make it great and to be shared by everyone. Please support this bank.
Is that a question? Yeah. That reminds me when I used to be mayor, we'd have public input. We'd start off one way and you'd end up at the end, and I never knew where the constituent was going. But Jack, that is well placed. Do we have any other questions or concerns? Or comments? I will tell you, when I rode the elevator up here and I didn't know where these people were going, what do you think they were talking about? Infrastructure. The three people in there were talking about their water system and trying to go to their congressman. I was trying to invite him here, but everybody's thinking of this because every community has the same problem. So I want to answer your question again from Progressive Democrats. How many in here like music? How many play music? I play percussion, so we set the rhythm, right? So think about what we're doing here is we're setting the rhythm, a little improvisationally. You all can be lead guitarists, you all can be lead singers. I'm in here to help set the rhythm with all these folks to get people to understand that this is important and this has to be done. We're not arguing about what key we're in, we're not arguing about what music we're playing. We're setting a beat that is eventually going to be something that people want to dance to, because I can guarantee you in every community, these issues are what make our communities livable. Are there any other comments or questions before we close this out? Has everyone had an opportunity to pick up our information? If not, please pick it up. Of course, we have plenty of drinks and coffee and some food left. I want to thank you all for coming out here, and I appreciate all of our speakers. Stu or Angela, do you want to say anything?
Well, I will
Angela,
say
come on up.
that everybody is invited to stay for a piece of cake in celebration of the youngest person here, Al-Fakir-Mutardi, whose birthday is tomorrow.
Al-Fakir! All right, we're going to have some cake. Again, thank you very much for coming out. My name was Randy Voller, and I was happy to be your moderator and host.